So, welcome everyone. I'm super excited to have Laura Lively here with us. Laura, do you want to say hello briefly and then I'll kind of introduce you?
I do want to say hello, and I'm going to turn off my video for a second because I'm getting notification that my internet is unstable. And so while I have my video off, I'm going to run and like plug in directly so that there's no issue. Okay,
You look
so
good
I'll
right
do
now. So,
that.
okay, perfect.
Um, that way, I don't want you guys. It makes me a little motion sick when people like move around on camera.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I just want to, yeah, I'm gonna like go back here and plug into the internet, and I'm just telling my husband that so he knows what I'm doing because I'm basically
Okay,
kicking him out of his office.
perfect.
So thank you guys so much for having me. Um,
And let me introduce you while you're getting all that stuff kind of. I'll just kind of give a little bit background and then you can jump in so you can sort of take care of whatever you got to take care of. Does that sound good?
yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So I met Laura through, we both became part of this group called Bright Line Eating, which is basically for people who have, if I would say, food addiction or issues with food, and in a desire to come into higher integrity with myself and my eating, I joined Bright Line Eating. And it's sort of like you go to school and there's a boot camp, and if you're curious about it, you can go check them out and take the food quiz or the food susceptible the I think it's the food susceptibility quiz, and they have like a free 14-day boot camp, and there's more things you can do. I don't know if that's free. I think it's very low cost to get into it. Any hoozle, Laura and I, so we both kind of in recovery from food addiction issues. I discovered through Bright Line Eating, they introduced the concept of IFS parts work or internal family systems, which Laura's going to kind of give us the down low on. And then we're going to have an opportunity maybe to get some coaching, maybe just to ask questions. Um, but through my own parts work that I did, both in Bright Line Eating classes, and I also worked one-on-one with Everett Considine, who I shared with you guys in the forum. I discovered that what happened to me is I started having this, I would, have my eating plan. And then what would happen is I would see, Oreos or something that I had made a plan not to eat. And then I would eat them because there was this part of me that was like, what you would call an indulger, or some people call them a seductive rationalizer. She's the part of me who's like, oh, sweetie, you've had a hard day. Like, you deserve to have that extra mocha or whatever it was, but my essential self, my true self, didn't want the mocha. Like, I didn't want the all the repercussions that came with that mocha or those Oreos. Um, but it really doesn't matter if you're a food addict like me or if you have something else. But what I realized as I started to dialogue with this part of ourself, and Laura's going to show us how we can do that, is that when I actually talked to her and I said, well, if you didn't have to worry about, taking care of me and like, soothing my raw emotions by, getting me to eat Oreos, like, what would you rather do? And she's like, oh, honey. And she looked like a Mad Men. Like, she was dressed like this fabulous secretary from like the 50s with like this circle skirt. And she always had like this platter full of like cocktails and cookies. That was kind of how I saw her in my mind's eye. And she's like, I want to dress up. And I was like, what? And that seems so odd, but I was like, okay, I'm going to honor that. So I started to dress up. And as I did that, like, pay attention to what I was wearing and start to treat myself like as if I was a rare and precious jewel of some sort, even though that felt a little funny. And it made the most huge difference for me. And I was able to, that work and more parts work that I did was able to get into abstinence from different things that I just wasn't wanting to eat. So that is the power of this work. It can really help you make miraculous shifts in all kinds of ways. So Laura, take it away. I'm
Thank you
so
guys.
thrilled you're here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I am truly, truly honored to have had this opportunity to talk to you guys a little bit about parts work. And like Sarah said, there is, and actually I realized that this morning while I was kind of finalizing what I was going to say to you was there's really nothing that parts work cannot help with. And in fact, I have my adage is all the world would be better off if they understood they have parts. And so I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. Anybody who is familiar with parts work at all, just so that I can kind of gauge the audience. Anybody familiar? Sophie,
Living in it.
Jill, Abby, Sarah. Okay, thanks. So I'm not going to, I just was curious, Amanda. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. First of all, one thing I always like to tell folks is that there, the idea of parts and parts work, it's not just internal family systems. I am trained in internal family systems, just like Everett is trained in internal family systems, but there are other sorts of models, of modalities, healing modalities, and schools of thought around the idea of having parts. And in fact, you can trace it easily for most anybody who had to take a psychology class in college back to Freud. Freud was convinced that we had three parts. We had an ego, an id, and a superego. And so this whole idea of having multiplicities um, is it goes way back, and I could give you lots of other examples, but I just wanted to. I'm always really clear to say that there are other types of modalities around parts work other than just internal family systems. There's one called focusing that is a parts work. There is NLP, neuro linguistic programming, I think is what that one is. And there's lots of them in the modern world as well as back in the day as well. Gestalt chair therapy is another way of looking at parts work. I don't know. I'm in the recovery world for food and alcohol, and ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics, talk about your inner child and parentified child, and your the mean parent. So there's again, this is in lots of places, and I think the reason that is because it makes sense to a lot of us. Like I don't know about you guys, but every morning when my alarm goes off, there's a part of me that's like, let's get up and get going. We've got things to do. And then there's another part that's like, I am not getting out of this bed. I don't care what you say. Or another part that's like, can't we just lay here for 30 more minutes? Please, I promise we'll get up at 7 instead of 6:30. I beg you, just let me sleep. And so I would argue that those are different parts of me and they have different agendas. One of them really would like to just go back to sleep and forget it. One part's like bargaining, give me just 30 more minutes. And another part's like, no, let's get going. I got things to do. I'm excited. I'm doing this talk today. And it's almost every morning. I have this argument in my head about what to do. And parts where it kind of makes sense to people, like the idea of the angel and the devil on your shoulder. Like, should I eat Oreos or should I not eat Oreos, right? And so this, I think, it's very it makes it very open to a lot of people because we've probably all at some point had two different warring voices in our heads trying to tell me, oh, I really should get my to-do list done, or let me just watch one more episode of whatever I'm binge watching on Netflix right now, right? So the idea is pretty common. Now, you guys are, I'm just taking a look at you guys. You guys look pretty young. So you may be too young to know this, but if you're of my age or of a certain age, back in the 70s, the 1970s, there were two movies that came out of Hollywood that really kind of put like a bad idea, a bad spin on the whole idea of parts. Sybil and Three Faces of Eve. Has anybody ever heard of that? Because that's almost always one of the first questions I get is, are you saying I'm Sybil? It's like, no, we're not saying you're Sybil. But we believe that having multiples is normal. Having different parts of us is normal. But, Hollywood being what Hollywood is, they put a bad spin and gave a bad name to people that had, at that time, it was called multiple personality disorder. Now it's called dissociative identity disorder. But no, I'm not saying you're Sybil, and I'm not saying there's, and that's one of the things I love about this model, this particular model, IFS, is it's non-patholo, it doesn't pathologize people. It says that there's nothing wrong with you for having different parts. There's nothing wrong with you. That, I would rather, again, watch another thing in Netflix versus mopping the floor. Are you starting to see a pattern? I'm seeing that. Are you hearing that I watch a lot of Netflix instead of doing what I need to do? So there's nothing wrong with those different parts of us wanting different things. And so another question that I sometimes get early on is like, Laura, you saying I'm just a big bag of parts? And the answer is no, you are not just a big bag of parts. You certainly have parts, but at your core, everyone has this core of what we call the self with a capital S. And this is also, you can find this in a lot of different religions, as a lot of different philosophies, that at your core, who you are at your core is an open, curious, caring, compassionate person. And over time, particularly when we were young, um, things happen to us. And these can be anything from what we call big T trauma, meaning a parent died, abuse, a fire at your home. Those are huge traumas that happen, to little T traumas, such as an example of when I was 6 years old, my first grade teacher decided she was going to teach us about number lines by having us get onto a scale and weigh us, and then we had to plot the number line. Well, I've been overweight since I was 3 years old, and at age 6, I knew this was going to end badly for me because I weighed more than any kid in the room, and that was trauma, and that created hurt and harm to me. And so while it's not the big T trauma, it's still trauma. And so parts come in to try to manage things for us when we're young. And so a part that I've now got to know, and cognitively, I can tell you the story of me standing at that scale, and as the line moves up, I know it's not going to end well. But what happened was is when I got to the front of the scale, a part jumped in to protect the little one who's feeling really bad, and it said, "No, I'm not getting on that scale." And so I stood there and lied to the teacher. I was like, "Nope, I was weighed last week." And it's funny because I know that story cognitively, but by doing parse work, I'm able to go back in and find out from that part, because the part that stood up and lied and said no, it was like it crossed. No, I'm not getting on that scale. I can see that part throughout my entire life. Anytime somebody in a position of authority asked me to do something that my part thought was stupid, the part would talk back. So I don't know if any of you guys came out of corporate America, but I can assure you that used to get me in quite a bit of trouble when somebody would ask me to do something stupid, and that part would jump in and tell them how ignorant that was, right? But that part was doing what it had to do since I was 6 years old, and it didn't know any better. And so this is what happens with our parts is internally they're stuck at an age, but they're doing what they think they have to do in order to help us. Um, because they think nobody else is there to help. And so the example with Sarah wanting, let's have Oreo cookies. There's a reason she wants those cookies. And then as she got to talk to the part, then she was able to find out what it was she would really prefer to do instead. And so that's what we do with parts work, is that we get in and, in a lot of cases with our parts, when they're trying to get us to do one thing or the other, or they're being critical of us, we don't want to hear them. And so we try to kick them to the curb or try to ignore them. And I cannot tell you how many books and programs I have read or seen where people are trying to tell you, kick them to the curb, just tell them, no, I'm not doing that. I don't know about you guys, but that has never worked for any inner critic of mine. Any inner critic of mine just comes back bigger and badder when I try to shut it up or shove it in a closet. And so what we do in internal family systems is we actually kind of like do a 180, and we want to hear about the parts. We want to hear what it is, what are they doing, what do they need, what are they trying. And if you right now have a part that says, I am never listening to an inner critic, welcome, you've just found another part. Because we have parts that don't like parts either. That's actually been the theme for the last 7 days in my practice, is that everybody seems to be running. I've noticed in my practice that themes run. And lots of my clients these days are finding parts that don't like their parts, and that's another part. And how do we know that? Because self, as I mentioned, would be open and curious and compassionate about their parts. And so anytime I'm running from a place of not feeling compassionate or not feeling open, then I'm blended with the part, and the part is kind of running my life. So I am going to just check my notes really quick and see, and I'll stop
And I was
And
gonna jump in and just say, yeah, I know as we've all been getting dressed and taking these selfies, it is very triggering on, it brings up all kinds of things from the past. One person was mentioning, all her thoughts about, she started thinking about junior high friends who would laugh at what she was wearing. I got sort of the shame attack of like, well, who do you think you are? Or like, just all kinds of things have come up and maybe people will share, but so I know these parts get stirred up by this dressing process.
yes, this morning. So I should have actually taken it. I run a group online for people who have seasonal affective disorder, and we're about to come out of that now. But I do Monday morning musings with them, and I got on with no makeup. My hair was like jacked, and I told him I was going to come talk to you guys. I said, and I'm going to go talk to these fashionistas, and I have to tell you what my parts had to say about that. And I was like, oh, and by the way, I just want to be really clear. To my knowledge, they're not calling themselves fashionistas. I've got a part that's calling them fashionistas. So when I started to get dressed this morning, I'm in Oklahoma right now, and we were like most of the United States, like freezing for 2 weeks. And so I put on this. So in my closet this morning, I was like, "Oh, what are we gonna wear? We're doing this thing today." And so I pulled out this shirt. It's this nice burnout. So I was very clothes conscious. But then I was like, "It's," and my parts were like, "We've been wearing long underwear for the last 2 weeks, and it's not that warm. You need to put something else on. This is cold." And I was like, and then another part was like, "No, you can't do that. That would look gross. There's no way you can wear those two things together. Are you nuts?" And then another part was like, but we're freezing! So let's go find these things, these like cool little arm warmer things that I bought for Christmas. And another part was like, those are so stupid. So, I mean, there was like this whole committee in my head telling me, this critical, I called them my fashion police, which I didn't even realize I had fashion police until this morning. So that was good to find out. And so I thought it might be interesting to spend some time here in a little bit to maybe you can do what I did this morning on my other call. Was I sat down and I said, let's talk to the fashion police. Let's find out why they're so upset about the way I look this morning and why they're so concerned about how do I show up for Sarah's group. So if you guys are open to that, we'll do a little bit of talking to maybe some of your inner critics. I don't know how that sounds.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds wonderful.
So
I
I
think
want to
part of the power of this is, yeah, like getting into the experience. Like it's wonderful to hear about people's parts, but to find our own is like that's the linchpin.
Yeah, so I want to say, this will say a couple of things. So back to how do you know if you're in a part versus how do you know if you have more self energy? And so self energy has some attributes like you're curious and you're compassionate and you're feeling open and feeling neutral. And so sometimes when we have critical parts being well critical, it's hard to feel open and neutral. And so I often find that if I have a part that starts reaming me, telling me I'm an idiot. How could you have done that? What were you thinking? I'll have another part jump in and start um, like defending me. Like, shut up! Stop being so mean to Laura. And someone's like, "What are you doing? How dare you?" And so anytime I feel that energy, I know that that's another part as well. And so what you can do with parts is ask them to give you some space. Can you step back so that I can get to this place of neutrality and openness. And Walt Whitman has a quote that I like that says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I'm going to go one step further because I don't think you can be curious and judgmental at the same time. So if you're feeling judgmental towards yourself or others, just kind of start to notice what that means. What is that about? And get curious, like so what's happening? What's up with that? Why am I feeling judgmental right now? Um, and we're going to do a little bit of that here in a few minutes. A couple of things I'd like to say about parts work is parts really want two things. They want to be acknowledged and appreciated. And like I said a little earlier, most of the time, and in again, unknown books, unknown number of books, unknown number of programs, people like want you to, shut it up, make that inner critic go away. I actually, that's again never worked for me. And so we're going to like kind of, flip the switch on that and we're going to actually listen and see what the part has to say because they often have good information from us. Also, in the work that I do, we believe all parts are welcome. Again, we're not trying to get rid of any parts. I'm actually not trying to get rid of your inner critic. I am not trying to get rid of the part that hates your inner critic. I am not trying to get rid of the skeptical parts that you might have right now saying, what the heck, this woman is talking a whole bunch of junk. I'm not trying to get rid of any of those parts. All of those parts are welcome. They're all there trying to protect you. Um, let's see. See if I've got any other points I want to make before we do something a little experiential. There's no wrong way to do parts work. That's one thing I want to say. People say, what do you mean parts? Like, are you seeing them in your head? Uh, can you hear them? How are they showing up for you? And so there's no really wrong way. Some people do see the parts in their head. Parts can have male energy, they can have female energy, they can be animals, they can be, I had a part, they can transform in the middle of a process. I had a part that started out as this really, it looked like a cartoon scribble of like black, and it was like a big mosquito, and it was just, you could see everywhere it moved. You could see all this black dark, cloudy, kind of like pigpen, sort of, like a mess all around it because it was so agitated. And then as I went through the process with it, it transformed into a beautiful, like fairy, like a flower fairy. So they can transform in the middle. So there's no wrong way to do parts work. I actually, as a rule, don't see mine. I tend to hear the voice, or I get this just like gut felt sense of, oh, that's the answer. Um, Sometimes parts provide you a memory, like you mentioned junior high. Sometimes they remind you of something that happened. And there's no wrong way. There's no wrong way. And there may be possible that parts don't want to talk to you. They may not trust you enough, and that's okay too. In this work, we're very um, gentle, and we let the parts lead. We don't put, so I'm talking to you and I'm talking to your parts. We don't push past parts. We let the parts lead to decide what we do and don't do. And if a part doesn't want to talk to us, we don't force it. And the other thing that's important if you start to listen to your parts and get curious is we all have thinking parts, very smart parts that are trying to figure things out. And so when I'll ask you guys some questions if you're interested in playing along. And I'll ask you to just ask the question and then to sit quietly and see what comes. Not trying to think of an answer, but just waiting and just seeing. And some of you may hear, you may see something, you may get a memory brought back, you may get a word pop into your consciousness. There's no wrong way to do parts. So let me see if I have any other little tidbits to give you. Yes, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions that you have.
Yeah, just feel free to unmute yourself if anybody has something they want to ask Laura. Okay, it sounds like everybody's maybe ready to go ahead. I bet there'll be questions after the experience.
Sure. So I would like to invite you, if you're comfortable, we're gonna you can either close your eyes or we're gonna do a little breath work, just a little. Just invite you to either close your eyes or soften your gaze and just take a few deep breaths and just take them at whatever feels right for you. We're not trying to force your lungs in or out, just letting your body maybe breathe just a quarter deeper than it normally does. Just taking a breath. Just thanking you, thank yourself and your parts that maybe brought you here today and being curious and open. Maybe take a moment to think about what part you might be interested in exploring. Do you have a fashionista police part that's been showing up in this group? Maybe you've had a part that says, you can't wear that, like I did. Or that looks terrible. You can't mix patterns. And instead of trying to ignore this part, we're going to see about getting to know it a little better. And if you just heard or felt another part say, heck no, I don't want to know it any better, or any other kind of negative thought, congratulations, you've just met another part, a part that doesn't like your police part, the part that's been maybe criticizing you in this group. And that's okay. Let it know you see it, let it know you hear it, or however it's showing up for you. Just a reminder to all of your parts, you're all welcome. And so maybe start to settle on the part, whatever part you choose, an inner critic, the part that doesn't like the part that says this is a bunch of crap, whatever. Just settle on a part. And often with parts, they're used to thinking they're alone. And so what we want to do is welcome them. I'm going to ask some questions, and I'd invite you to repeat those questions to your part because we want them to start to see that they are not alone. You are here with them. So, this part that you've settled on, do you sense it somewhere in or around your body? Or maybe the last time it was active? Did you did you hear it? Could you feel it tightening something in your body? How did it show up for you? And I'd like to now have you thank it for showing up and just ask. Ask it if it's willing to speak with you and just see what comes. If it said yes, then thank it for being willing to speak with you. Ask it, what is its role in your life? What is its job? What does it do for you? And again, don't try to think of an answer, just see what comes. And ask this part, how does it do its job? How does it show up in your life? Thank it for sharing any information it's providing. Again, parts want two things. They want to be acknowledged and appreciated. Ask this part, how long has it been doing this job?
Excuse me, what were
Mm-hmm.
we supposed to ask the part?
Ask the part, how long, or what is its job in your life? What does it do for you? And then if it shares that with you, ask it how long it's been doing that job. And then ask the part, how does it feel about doing that job? And then ask the part, how old does it think you are right now? and just see what comes. And ask the part, is there anything else it would like to tell you before we close? And ask it if there's anything else it needs from you before we close. And then thank the part for any information it was able to share with you. And if you're open to staying in contact with the part, let it know. And I'd invite you to just take a couple of breaths. Just let your body breathe you. And whatever happened or didn't happen was exactly as it should be. If nothing happened, you may have had parts that are protecting you because this is unknown. That's okay. If you had skeptical parts, that's okay too. We see them as well. I just invite you to open your eyes when you're ready. So I did a version of this exercise this morning after my parts were kind of anxious about coming here today. And so I asked them some of those questions. What are you afraid is going to happen if you don't tell me that I can't dress like that? And the part was like, they're not going to like you. And it was like, thank you for sharing that with me. I really was able to take that in, that that part was really afraid that you wouldn't like me if I wasn't dressed appropriately for a fabulous fashion group. And once I'm able to do that and just hear them, the parts were able to relax back and then allow me to get on with my day. So I'm curious if anybody's interested in sharing what happened, if anything, and if nothing, again, no harm, no foul. Rhonda has her hand up. Hi, Rhonda. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, you too. I had I didn't think it was going to be visual, but I had this little like penguin-like shape coming up out of snow, so it was all white. And I asked it, I think the first question was, what does it do, right? Or so what it told me it did was help me to get 8 hours of sleep every night because I'm very consistent with my sleep. And it told me it massaged my mind and helped the worry stay away while I'm sleeping.
Oh, I love that.
And the message, oh, I said it loved doing its job.
Nice.
And the message that it had for me was, don't worry, be happy.
Aw.
And it said, and the advice was to keep your bedtime regular. Like I go to bed early and it's been getting a little bit later, and it was like, please try to keep your bedtimes regular, and then I can do my part of the work.
Nice. I love that. I was just talking with a new client and we were talking about, so in self energy, I'll talk a little bit more about that because at our core we all have self energy, And sometimes it gets all covered up with these parts doing all these things, and it's hard to get to that self energy. Um, but but so we do in IFS we call it unblending, where we unblend from parts so that we can get to a place of open curiosity about a part. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to blend with parts that are actually very helpful to us. Like it sounds like Rhonda, like your part is. And I also I have previously struggled with sleep, and I have learned to, when I'm laying down and if there's like all this cacophony in my head, I've learned to ask those parts that to step back, and then there's always a sleepy part or I wouldn't be going to bed. And so I kind of in my head, I'm visualizing pulling up the sleepy part like a blanket and letting it, letting the other guys step back, and I'm going to sleep because I'm blending with all of that energy from the sleepy part. That's what it reminded me of was your penguin. So maybe now my sleepy part will turn into a penguin. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing.
Thanks.
Anybody else like to share? Did anybody have a part? Any part turn up?
Oh, Abby's wanting to share.
Sure.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
Abby. It's
Can
nice
you,
to meet
can
you.
you, nice to meet you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So I actually, the part that came up for me was a part that she comes around in the evening sometimes, like after dinner, when I don't feel, I find myself eating things that I know are not like in line with what's good for my body. And often it's something sweet and I'm not even really hungry, but I don't feel satisfied in some way, like I'm unsatisfied. So I think this is probably something many people deal with. But this part, she said she came when I was 3, and that she was trying to help keep me calm. That's what she was trying to do, to calm me down. And the age that she was trying to, that you asked about 2 ages. One was like when she came up, and then the second age was how old I was when she arrived, I think.
Well, it was actually really, how old are you now?
How old are you now? Okay, so what came to me was that she arrived on the scene when I was 14. Like that's what I got a picture of my 14-year-old self, and she was trying to help my 14-year-old self. And so I used to ask her what she needed and what she wanted, and she said she really was tired and that she really wants to rest, and that yeah, she really, really, really wants to rest, and she wants me to let go. So and she also wants me to feel calm at the same time, but more than that, she really wants to let go. So I found it very moving. I've done some parts work, but I've kind of wanted to do more, and I think I have something to work with here. This is pretty powerful. So thank you.
What a beautiful, thank you for sharing. We asked the question, I do ask the question 2 different ways. One is, how long have they been doing the job? Did you all hear that?
I did.
What was it?
Huh. It sounded like a train or some like segue in I don't know. It was an interesting sound, but okay. We ask it a couple different ways because our parts are kind of stuck back in time. And we ask it a couple different ways because time is not linear for our parts like it is for us out here in our world. And so I ask it to try to get a gauge on where the part is stuck. And what we do if we're like have time to do a full session is we would go in and update the part as to where you currently are in life. I'm assuming you're not 3 or 14 anymore. And so we would update the part about where you currently are in life. And in your case, I might suggest that, you know, maybe it sounded like you might have health goals that don't include eating sweet num-nums at night. Yeah. And you might update the part about what your health goals are in that particular situation. You might you might want to update it about, depending on, what it is the part wants. You can also update parts about what resources you might have now that you didn't have when you were 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever the years were. You know, I now have a car. I can get away if I need to. I have money in the bank. I don't live with my parents anymore. You know, whatever the part's concern is, you can kind of help steer them in your update to help them understand that things are different now than whatever it was when you were 3 or 14. Um, the one thing that, oh gosh, probably 80% of the time, our parts have no idea how old we are. They think we're stuck at an earlier age. And so that update becomes an important way for us. In session, I say, let's all get on the same page. Can we all get on the same page? Because sometimes parts will get funky and they don't want to be updated. They're like, no, I like my job and I'm doing it now. You know, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm going to do. And that's okay too. Again, we don't argue with parts. We don't try to make them wrong or bad because we've been doing that most of our lives. And it's amazing what happens. My parts often say, "Oh my God, you're old," when I update them because I'm in my mid 50s now, and they think I'm like 8, 10, 5, something like that. And so we do that update just so that we can all be on the same page about where we currently are in life. And a lot of times they're really surprised to find out that we're no longer that age. And then there's an opportunity to say, like Sarah did, what would you prefer to do? If you don't have to do this job like you thought you did, what would you like to do? And one of the things I've noticed is, and Sarah, I don't know exactly what was the, I mean, I read your email and I'm not exactly sure the impetus of this, but often what parts want is they want to relax or they want to play and they want to have some joy in their lives. And so I feel like that you guys are playing with clothes and that probably is bringing lots of joy.
It's bringing so much joy that I would have had no idea. Like, and if I wouldn't have let myself do that, because there's another part of me would have said, I've got sort of this, a critic who's a nun, who's very moral and very, like, you should be saving the children of Calcutta, not, shopping at Poshmark right now or thrifting with your daughter. You should be feeding the homeless. So
So yeah, so I mean, I love what this group is doing is like learning to play. You're playing parts. A couple of things I've learned that I'll just kind of impart a little knowledge on is about parts. Parts love choice, and I actually do this in my own. I even alluded to this. I give them the choice of should I wear this or this. Now you guys might go even crazier. I do that because I've learned they'll do things I'm not really sure I want to wear. So I offer them choice. Do you want to wear this blouse or this blouse? I don't have children, but I've heard that a lot of what I do with my parts is like offering safe choices to children. So I came out of corporate America prior to this life change, and I was every day at 3 o'clock, my energy tanked, and I would go get Diet Coke and M&Ms. That was my 3 o'clock pickup. So not every day, but it's not uncommon for parts suddenly at 3 o'clock go, it's 3 o'clock. What should we eat? And like Sarah mentioned, I'm on Bright Line Eating, and I don't eat between meals. And so I will offer the parts. Your options here are hot tea, fizzy water, or dinners in 2 hours. What would you like? And so offering them, and I've learned the hard way to offer them all the choices at once, because if I say, would you like hot tea? No. Would you like fizzy water? No. Do you want to wait for dinner? No. I mean, I think they're waiting for me to offer them a hot fudge sundae or something, which is not going to happen. So I've learned to offer them the choices. And what's funny to me is I don't ever know which one they're going to take. Like some days they're like, it's too much trouble to go make hot tea. It's like 10 steps to the kitchen, right? And I'm like, it's too much trouble to go make hot tea. Okay. And some days they're like, fine, we'll just wait for dinner. So I never know what the answer is when I offer it up as to what it is they want, but parts love choices. And since you guys are playing in clothes, I offer them up, do you want this or this? And they like that because it includes them in your life. And the whole idea with the parts work is to integrate them into who you are so that you have access to the gifts that they bring, and then they don't have to do this extreme role that they've been stuck in since you were a child.
which is often thwarting one of your desires. Like for me to come into integrity with my eating, there were several parts thwarting me in every attempt I would make to do that. And so once I became aware of them, like Laura said, and started talking nicely to them and finding out what they wanted, it made a huge difference. Yeah.
And it goes far beyond food. I've
Yeah.
used them now in recovery with alcohol. I've used them to actually build a business and become IFS certified. I mean, I use them. Uh, IFS has completely changed my life, and now I have a rewarding career helping other people because and, and that was the game changer, was being willing to look inside for the answers, and being willing to listen to what all those different parts of me had to say. Anybody else like to share what happened? Or
Yeah.
Leslie?
Yeah, I'll share real quick. I have to, partly because I have to go. I have to go to get to school pickup. But thank you for this. I had something else that I was supposed to be doing right now, and I didn't even get dressed today. I have on this big flannel shirt, but my thing got canceled, and so I kind of made some space for this, which I'm really happy that I got to hear what you have to say, Laura. Thank you, Sarah. I was I've had a big fear thing recently that's just bugging me, and I was talking to somebody who does some coaching type stuff, and she advised me to. She reminded me that the fear is there to protect me. Um, it goes back a long way, and to thank it for its service, but to tell it to, or ask it to, not, she didn't say kick it to the curb, but move out of the way a little bit so that I can. So I kind of concentrated on that part during this exercise, and it was interesting to sort of hear what came about. And if the fear is a she's here, I suppose, might be. She told me that she's not going to leave me, but she's happy to do her job. But I feel like we can enter an agreement that maybe I can relieve her some of those duties and let some other stuff come out and help, and she doesn't have to do her job alone. If that makes any sense.
Yes,
And
to
so
me that makes
she can
100%.
relax a little bit.
Yes,
And if she can relax a little bit, then I can relax a little bit.
that's right.
And we can coexist. So
That's right.
I have to go, but I really appreciate the tapping into something. So
Thank you, Leslie.
thank you. I know.
Leslie, bye.
Nice to say bye.
Yeah, parts think they're alone and they think that they have to do what they're doing. And so that's one of the things that we try to establish, is that they can understand they're not alone and they're also not you. You in self are separate from them. And the idea is that they can start to see that they're separate, and then you also see that they're separate, but they recognize they're not alone anymore. Because these parts are really young. They were at the time, whatever time that they cropped up, like my little 6-year-old guy that, like, he was a guy. He was like a scruffy Dennis the Menace, and he like jumped up when I was 6 years old, and he's been doing that like job ever since. And I could, like I said, I could see all through my corporate career every time he jumped up and my mouth got me in trouble. But once I worked with him and he recognized that I'm an adult now and he knows he doesn't have to do it by himself, he's like off playing now. So that's the beauty of this, is that these parts can start to recognize that they are not alone. I say that you're not alone. I see you. I hear you. I get that you're frustrated. Yeah, so I love that. Thanks, Leslie, for sharing.
And Meredith G has her hand
Hi,
raised.
Meredith.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm in my office, so I can't have my phone, my video on. So I'm curious. I stopped drinking a while back, and no shock. I started eating in certain ways. I mean, I think I ate more ice cream in the last year than I ate in the prior 58 years of my life.
I hear that.
Yeah. So I sort of, and of course I, love my coffee too. So what I'm curious about is, so negotiated with my parts about not drinking. And I feel like now I'm going back to them and saying like, hey, we're not gonna be eating this crap anymore either. So I'm just curious about, clearly you're, you focused on food a lot. I'm just curious about how you would think about approaching your parts with, well, here's another thing we're gonna have to ease off on.
So I wouldn't be 100% certain they're the same parts. I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I've been gluten intolerant since 2009, so I could not eat any wheat flour for years, which meant that, and so that was before gluten-free food was readily available. And so I could walk into a donut shop without any trouble, and I was never going to eat donuts because they were full of wheat. It had nothing to do with sugar. It just had to do with flour. And I knew it made me sick. I mean, physically made me sick. So then after I joined Bright Line Eating, which is a kind of based on OA, and so no sugar, no flour, I walked into a donut shop to pick up donuts for movers. And suddenly and I didn't know this because didn't know parts work then. I had a part that was just like livid. I was so angry standing there in line getting the damn donuts. And I was like, and there was another part of me going, what is happening? I said, to a BLA friend, I said, I feel like I'm having to, I don't know if this is the right term, it's the term I use. I feel like I'm relitigating sugar. Like now I have to fight, and it made no sense to me. And so what I learned after learning about parts was that the parts that knew I couldn't eat flour, they were totally cool. But now I had parts that knew that they couldn't eat sugar, and they weren't putting together the puzzle that, the sugar you're complaining about not being able to eat is the same in the same edible that you can't eat anyway because of the flour. So they were different parts. I say that because that turned out to also be true with my alcohol and my food parts. I did my food first and got sugar out of my system, and I think it had to be that way for me personally. So I did that first, and then I switched to the alcohol parts, and they're not the same set of parts. So I'm not saying yours are or are not, but I'm saying don't be surprised if they're not the same parts. You might spend some time with the alcohol parts, the parts that because I had a part that liked to drink. I had lots of parts that were scared of the part that liked to drink. I had a part that believed that, oh, well, if I heal the alcohol part, I can drink again. And that was the part that was scaring all the other parts. But when I talked to the alcohol part, I asked the part, why do you like to drink? What is it about? And I spent several weeks, months working with the alcohol part, understanding what was driving that behavior. And like somebody I think said earlier, it's about being calm or about calming down. The part liked how I felt when after that second glass, and I would slam them. When I'd slam back that second glass of wine, there was this moment where I was no longer there. It was all gone, right?
Mhm.
And unfortunately, then I binge drank after that, and it turned ugly. But so that's what the part was after. It was after that feeling of, oh, everything's gone. Like Calgon, take me away if you're that old, if you're
Yep.
that age, right? And so I worked with my therapist, and we talked about that's what the part wants. It wants to be taken away. And so, what can I do to help it have that opportunity to feel as much of that feeling as it can, and but not drink? And so that it took some time, but I would start there, and then I would check in with the parts that are eating the ice cream, and I would just again not assume it's the same part, and I would ask it, what does it need? What is it looking for with the ice cream? Why is it like the ice cream? And just be open and curious about what it has to say.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. That was
You're very welcome.
Does anybody have another part that they met that they want to share? Because we've got a little bit of time left.
Jill.
Hi, thank you so much. That was just so helpful, Laura, and thanks everybody else for sharing, because that's been helpful as well. I really appreciate that. So for me, it was very clear. I I was having this very intense dialogue with this new thing that I wasn't aware was there. And it was the, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. Part. And so when the conversation, what it seemed to want to do is sleep and be off duty. And it said that it had been on duty not only since I was little, but like forever. Like it sounded like it was a generational thing, like it had been taking care of everybody.
They absolutely can be.
And so it was just really tired. And so when I just literally asked, if I could tuck it in, it said, please. And it was just a very, some emotion came up, but it was just a very, it was so mad and so sad. And I could feel this open-hearted, warm-hearted place in me that just wanted to, kind of care for it. So I don't know.
You're making me so happy. I don't know if you're happy, but I'm happy.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
I was very happy. Thank you.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
If I could spend just the last couple of minutes, my recommendation, we ask if the parts were willing to stay in touch with you. And if they were, I recommend a check-in. And it's always, I think it's easy if you happen to have any sort of meditative practice or any other habit things you do, you can just maybe slide one more thing in there. And it doesn't have to be time consuming. Mine is very minimal. And I know lots of people do amazing things. And so I'll address that first because that's not how I live my life, but clients do. Some people journal to their parts. Some people draw their parts. Some people collage their parts. Those are fabulous. I wish them well. That's just not my life. And so I do a check-in, and I do this as my head hits the pillow, because that tends to be when the parts want to talk. And so I just check in and see, is there anything you need from me? And 95% of the time, there really isn't. Most of the time, everything is quiet. My one part that I call my taskmaster, who's just recently asked me to call him Harry, which after 2.5 years on Sunday, I said, you can also ask, you don't know what to call them, you can ask them. So I tend to call them by what their job is. But so Harry, my taskmaster, he tends to have something to say to me when I'm trying to go to sleep at night. And so because he was keeping me awake, we negotiated that I would send a text with whatever it was I'd forgotten or that he wanted to make sure I remembered. And he knows that that's the first thing I do to pick up that text in the morning. But I check in and say, how are you doing? If you're talking to the part you just found, is there anything you need from me? And then I just sit and wait, just like we did in session here. And most of the time I hear nothing, and that's okay. The idea is that you're building consistency with check-in so that they can, again, learn to recognize you are there and that they are not alone. So I always consider silence is golden. If they have nothing to say, fabulous. If they have something to tell me, also fabulous. So my check-in at night is 90 seconds long. If some people, if you happen to brush your teeth before you go to bed at night, that's another. If you're just, what are you doing consistently? Me consistently, I'm putting my head on a pillow. That I can tell you I'm going to do at night. And so that's why I tacked it there. But if you have another place that's better for you, feel free. But the idea is consistency, because we want them to recognize that they are not you, and I want you to recognize you are not your parts. And that consistent check-in is you building up trust with them that you will be there for them, that they are not alone, and that they don't have to do their jobs by themselves. That's it.
So amazing. Laura Lively, thank you so much. You are amazing. And what you brought today, it's just so profound. And this is complicated stuff, but you made it so accessible and really powerful. And I know we'll be sharing in the group afterwards and connecting with these parts. And I'm super excited. I'm going to write on my bedside table, check in with parts, because that's a really great time for me. Because usually I can stay awake about 5 minutes, and that might be enough time for me to check in.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to know that Laura offers 1 hour free. Tell me how you.
That's right. I do actually. So my website right now is set up mostly for people that do have eating issues, but I do offer a 50-minute peaceful eating. Is what I call it. But you can talk to me about anything. So I'm at lauralively.com. It's hard to remember. And feel free to sign up. I would love to talk to you to see, we could do some work and you may decide that's one and done. And that's beautiful too. I just love helping people. I have a part that really loves helping people.
One of the best gifts I gave myself after my mom died this fall was I just decided now's the time. And I did 10 parts work sessions. And every week I was like, oh my gosh, can I even talk about myself? I mean, I was like, is there more? But there was always more. And oh man, it was the biggest payoff. Like if you can, I highly recommend it. So anyway, thank you, Laura.
Thank you guys so much. It was
Grateful.
wonderful to meet you.
Yes. All right. Well, and I'm going to post your website because there's many people that couldn't come today that will be listening to the recording. And so perhaps they will be getting in touch.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye everyone. If you want to unmute and say goodbye, you can, but otherwise we'll see
Thanks,
you.
Laura.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, Sophie. Bye, Meredith.
Bye.
Bye, Naomi. Bye, Jill.
Thank you.
Bye, Emily. Take care, everyone. Bye, Abby.